Good morning and welcome to the new edition of my live comments. Every led, liberal read Democrat led government, possibly vies with another, competes with another country to have more and more larger debt. We have seen in the countries south of Canada, USA, has a public debt worth 13 trillion. 13 trillion, that's the debt. While the national debt of a country like China is zero, Russia is zero. But the more liberal that you are, or the more democratic you are, again, democratic not in the real sense, but in the sense of having liberal tendencies, the debt increases. Here in Canada, in our hometown country, we had a national debt when the Conservatives took power way back, about 15 years back, Prime Minister Harper with a minority government. It rose in the first time and the second time, in the second tenure of Harper, we saw that it was stabilizing. The budgets were getting balanced. And in 2014, when the elections took place, it was a balanced budget with a minor debt of about one F-35 cost, that's about 35 billion. That's it. But now, in the last few years, Canadian federal government's total market debt has exceeded $1 trillion. Imagination staggers that a country which is supposed to be the richest country as far as the natural resources are concerned should have that much of market debt. And now there's a difference between market debt and the national debt. Market debt is that on which the government has to pay interest. National debt is extra than the market debt. So if I combine market debt and the national debt, it might come to 4-5 trillion. And that is where the rub lies. For the first time in the history of Canada, this interest-paying debt has increased and exceeded $1 trillion. And that is not what I'm saying, that is as per the documents of the Department of Finance of the federal government. The threshold highlights the urgent need and imperative need for the government to have a strategy that balances the federal books and manages the debt, especially in the time when the rising interest rates are there. The time is over when the interest rate was 0 or 1%. It's increasing. And with the protectionist policies of USA, the interest is likely to go up higher. And that is why Canadian dollar is sliding down. The market debt, again, as I said, is different than the federal debt and the debt is shown at the end of the balance. For example, our balance shows a deficit of 36 billion. It can go up. But this debt is on the money borrowed through bonds or by mortgaging our assets. We are paying interest on that. And those debts are regularly presented and debated by the Canadians and reflect the government's total liability. And that cash needed, that shortage has to be borrowed from the market. As a matter of fact, this market debt of more than 1 trillion is like a balance on the line of credit. and it's a debt that generates interest, Canadians will be surprised to know how fast the public debt is grown in the last 5 years. Another thing to be taken into consideration is very clear that this debt figure of 1 trillion plus does not reflect the cash, the land, or other assets that the federal government has on hand. Imagine, how are you going to explain it to the people that they and their progeny would have to pay taxes so that this debt can be paid off? Very deeply buried in the federal government budget is a passing reference to both the market debt and the limits to which the federal government can borrow. As per the Finance Department, the total debt stock this Saturday, when the financial year ended, was 1.029 trillion. That was on Saturday. 3 days have passed after that, so the figure has gone up a bit higher because of the interest which is calculated per day. And that is why when you have next year budget, you would find that this figure would be hidden somewhere, not shown. People are not even aware. And passing this 1 trillion debt is bad. You see, I was amazed to know that the finance minister's recent fiscal plan noted that the outstanding government and crown corporations debt would be 1.066 trillion. So already they are thinking of going up from 029 to 066. It's going up within this year. And that is admitted by the finance minister. Why is this happening? Has anybody noticed it? And I was amazed when the finance minister, in a very proud and confident manner, announced, we are a 2 trillion economy. So to have a federal level of more than a trillion, it is not too bad. He forgot it's significant. If of your 2 trillion economy, more than 50% is debt, then how you are a 2 trillion economy? Whom are you trying to impress or trying to mislead? People can read that 2 trillion minus 1.029 trillion still does not remain 2 trillion. It's less than 1 trillion, about 700 billion. Why is it that the finance minister and the prime minister have not opened up their eyes? It's a different calculation. And as a matter of fact, the figures given by Mr. Morneau, the finance minister, on the budget day are much lower than the real actual figures. The federal budget has been presented on an accrual accounting method which records transactions differently, spread over financial obligations, and includes assets such as cash on hand. When you take up that accrual system, the debt comes to be less. In reality, it's much more. And as a matter of fact, when assets and cash reserves are counted in the federal government's liabilities, including crown corporations, do you know that deficit could be 651.5 billion in this current year alone? So more than half a trillion would be in one current year if the proper accounting methods, the normal accounting methods with the organizations and the corporations adopt. But the government has its own accrual accounting method, thereby glossing over the reality. And this is continuing, as a matter of fact. The government is trying to get us to focus on the best possible number. But what we Canadians need is a fuller picture, a complete picture, not a picture which hides some realities. And those realities are so dark and have a foreboding that they are likely to lead us to a situation where at one time Germany was. We cannot be cavalier about the mounting debt for the simple reason the population. Now the per capita debt here is much higher than the per capita debt of USA because USA has much more population. One way to understand the market debt is to think of the public accounts in the terms of household finance, not the accrual method. A family that owns $400,000, let's say, on a mortgage for their home, but has an equity and assets worth $150,000, is said to have a liability of $250,000. As simple as that. So this is your mortgage, this is your equity and assets, so balance is just $250,000. The same family's market debt is actually $400,000, not $250,000. And that's what the government hides. They subtract the assets which are non-productive. They do not give you the money. They are useful but not productive economically. That different. Now, as I said, the actual balance of that family is $400,000 because that much is their loan from the bank on which they are making payments and interest. And you must be aware, because all of you have taken mortgages, that most of the payments that you make while paying off the mortgage is interest rather than the principal. But the government goes by the different method. Well, we have these assets, but can you sell the radio hall? Can you sell the Parliament House, the House of Commons, or the Parliament building? Can you sell the Wellington Street? No, but they are your assets. But they cannot be encashed. And that is what the government hides. It's important for the parliamentarians, at least, to look at the federal finances through a wide lens. The Liberals have defended their deficit and debt spending by saying that they are measured against a growing economy of other G7 countries. And when compared to some G7 countries, arguably it might look good. But again, there's a catch. The debt to GDP ratio here is 30.4%, was projected to decline to 28.4% in 10 years. That is, by the end of 10 years, we will have that debt ratio from 30.4 to 28.4. That is consoling us. But if you look at the full picture, you would find that it's neither wrong. I do not say it's wrong or misleading. It's a different method. But if we look at it, the main purpose of paying off is using your asset is that you should be able to sell it off. You are living in a house. It's your equity. But to pay off the debt, would you become homeless? That's the same question the federal government has to ask itself. Not all the financial assets can be used. If Canada was like a country like Greece or Ireland, then you had some possibility of paying off because the pension funds. But here you cannot pull money out of the pension plans and say, here's our cash. Greece did that. But that did not save it from being insolvent. Canada has a reasonably better balance sheet, but that is because of the accrual method. Historically, if I look at it, total economic history of Canada, only 2 times the federal crown corporations had as much market debt today. It was only once before it had that, and that was during the time of Paul Martin. Never before Paul Martin, and never after Paul Martin, except now the situation is that. And the Department of Finance figure shows the debt of these crown corporations has risen by $40 billion. In 2015-16, it was $266.5 billion, and now it's $305.7 billion. So just imagine from 2015, 2016 to 2017, 2018, it has increased by almost $1 billion. 100 billion, sorry. So why is it that we are having that? The red ink or the crown corporation is not a part of the market debt of the federal government. It is apart from that. So if you add that, then it goes up. So debt ceiling is important. At present, the government cannot go into debt further because the limit is 1.168 trillion, which they will possibly reach by the end of the year. So it is quite possible that before the next elections, the government may have to go to the parliament to increase the ceiling, the way the Congress has done in USA. But what we need is now A, transparency on borrowing. How much is the government borrowing? At what rate is it borrowing? And how has it accounted for the increase in the interest rates? Federal government officials, they say, they are sure that Canada would not have faced the gridlock of the government shutdown that has plagued Washington. And this is because in USA, the federal cabinet has the power to borrow on line of credit to refinance. It's not something which favors the government, but they can misuse it, and they are misusing it. We need a flexibility to avoid the risk of debt default, and it can occur today. This is a serious economic situation when the people say we are G7 and G8 countries. That is no consequence. The point is how much you actually owe to the others on which you are paying interest. I would not be that much bothered by the national debt as I am bothered by the market debt. Because market debt is something which is a stranglehold and which increases unproductively because of the interest rate. Are the mandarins on Ottawa listening? Kevin Page said the same thing, and he was shown the door. It's time that they become more accountable, more clear, and do not adopt the accrual systems of accounting, but come up clearly and tell people that these assets are there, but they are not available for cash. That we have an urgent economic situation to address, and we should be changed to, must not waste money on the wasteful things, as the government has just today announced that they are going to accept more refugees from Israel. The people who want to leave Israel, the government of Canada is gracious enough to accept that. So the market debt would go up still further. What do I say? Lord, give them the intellect which they do not have, or if they have it, they do not use it. Let them use. They're capable people, but they purposely look the other side, the other way, to hide their reality of the economic situation and mislead people. It's high time to come open to the nation and tell what is what. I dare government do it. Thank you.